Hi, it's Nick from the Run Testers. In this video we're going to be comparing the Asics Metaspeed Sky and the Nike Vaporfly NEXT 2. So we'll look at some of the kind of key stats of the shoe first. Might as well start with the price, and the Metaspeed Sky is £225 in the UK and $250 in the US. Now it's a little bit more expensive than the Vaporfly, which has some colourways available for £210 or so, or $225, although a lot of the colours are actually very similarly priced at £225 in the UK or $240. They are very, very similar in terms of weight. In my UK size 9, the Asics is 209 grams or 7.4 ounces, whereas Nike's 206 grams, 7.3 ounces. The drop is a bit different though. The Nike has a 8mm drop and the Asics is a 5mm drop, a slightly lower kind of drop super shoe, although there is the Metaspeed Edge Plus, which has a drop similar to the Nike. In terms of the stack height, they're both kind of pushing right up against that kind of 40mm limit set by World Athletics. Maybe the Vaporfly is slightly below it, but there's no actual official stats on the Vaporfly. When it comes to the design of the shoe, the Asics Metaspeed Sky Plus has a motion wrap upper. This is a lightweight woven mesh. We've also rejigged the laces from the first version of the shoe to try and create a better kind of lockdown fit. It also has a new last to kind of improve toe spring and get a better fit in the toe box. A lot of people had problems with the fit of the original Metaspeed Sky, so hopefully that little change will fix that for them. In the midsole you have Asics' Flight Foam Blast Turbo Foam, and you have a whole lot of it. It's actually even more in the midsole than there was on the original Metaspeed Sky. A lot of that has been kind of packed into the forefoot, which is now really bulging with foam. You've got a full length carbon plate obviously, and with the Metaspeed Sky Plus the plate is now placed a little bit closer to the kind of top of the foam, so it's aimed at this kind of bouncy striding runner who will hopefully put a lot of energy into that plate with its new position and get, you know, a big amount of propulsion back from it. That's in contrast to the Metaspeed Edge Plus, where the plate is a little bit more curved and sits a bit deeper in the foam. So the outsole has a lot of coverage on the forefoot. As you can see, it really extends right up there for your toe off, and then two kind of strips of rubber at the back which don't extend very far back, and this is a problem with the shoe a little bit, is it doesn't really cover the heel very well and you can rip up a bit of the foam there. The Vaporfly NEXT has a breathable engineered kind of mesh upper that looks a bit like a knit. It's a very open design with a little bit of kind of reinforcement around the toes to kind of lift the material off your toes a little bit. You've got the kind of classic offset laces, now familiar with the Vaporfly line, and you've got a little bit of padding around the tongue, but not much, and then this kind of strip of foam at the back here to kind of protect the Achilles and heel. Actually, there's a bit more foam on the Metaspeed Sky, as you can see there. It's got a bit more cushioning at the back to try and hold the heel firmly in place. Midsole is, you know, very familiar to us by now. It's a full Zoom X foam midsole, Nike's impressive PIBA foam that's really set the standard for all these modern super foams, and a full length carbon plate with a nice big scoop in it to kind of ping you on your way during your runs. And then on the outsole you've got a similar design to the Asics, but you've got, you know, again, very generous forefoot coverage for grip when running hard, and then two strips of rubber at the back. They extend very slightly further back, which does help with me, in particular on my left foot, which is the one that seems to rip up the Asics the most. Just means you don't get quite so much wear and tear at the back there on exposed foam.
When it came to fit for me, I ran true to size in both of these. UK 8.5 is my size and I had no problems with either. I'd be recommending going true to size. The one thing I will say, I do feel like the Metaspeed Sky Plus have a little bit more of a traditional upper. It's a little bit more kind of dense. It wraps a bit kind of firmer. I think the Nike Vaporfly NEXT 2 feel a little bit lighter on the foot. There's a little bit more wiggle room in the toe box, I would say, but yeah, I recommend going true to size.
Okay, so the fit for me in the Asics Metaspeed Sky Plus is true to size. I find it a very comfortable shoe. It doesn't feel too narrow, it doesn't feel restrictive in any way. So I would definitely stick true to size in the Asics Metaspeed Sky Plus. Vaporfly, again, it's true to size, but it is a slightly more narrow shoe, so take that into consideration if you have wider feet, but I would definitely stick with true to size for the Vaporfly 2 as well.
Both of these shoes fit really nicely true to size for me. I have a nice amount of room in the toe box in both of them and a good hold in the midfoot in both. The Asics is a bit kind of more secure at the heel, I would say. Early on with the Vaporfly NEXT 2, I did have some heel rub issues, so I've ended up having to heel lock the laces and really make sure I get a good tight fit each time I use it. But since I've done that, I've had no more problems with slippage. But you have to think about the fit a little bit more in the Nike, I think, whereas the Asics just, I pull on and it fits very nicely indeed. These are two racing shoes that I've absolutely loved using. I've loved racing in them, and I've got PBs in both of these actually. I recently ran my 5k PB in the Vaporfly, which was 15:30, and it did have my half marathon PB as well until last weekend when I used the Metaspeed Sky Plus at the Edinburgh Half Marathon and ran a 1:10:23 and knocked 2 seconds off the PB set by the Nike, although that was on a much flatter course, whereas a bit of friendly downhill in the Edinburgh Half Marathon helped me on the day there. Basically, I really like both of these shoes. They're fantastic, top tier carbon racing shoes, but they have got a slightly different feel to their ride. The Nike is much more aggressive, tippy forward feel with that higher drop that really just gets you through your foot strike and on your way, especially towards the end of races where you're really starting to flag and you're maybe not kind of leaning forward and running as well as you were at the start of the race. Whereas the Asics I found in my use, as someone who's really not the typical runner for the Metaspeed Sky, I am a very shuffly, high cadence runner. I found that I've really got to be leaning forward on my game with this shoe, but when I am, it feels fantastic. There's a huge amount of kind of bounce and lovely feel to the ride with the Metaspeed Sky Plus, but if you are kind of relaxing a bit or chilling out or not really running with enough purpose, you start to lose, I think, the benefits of the shoe here. Whereas I think when you're starting to flag, the Vaporfly kind of keeps you going a bit longer, and it's not going to run the race for you, but it does feel like it helps you hold on to a fast pace when you're starting to flag. With the Asics, I feel like you've got to be more on it to get the best from the shoe. The other thing with the low drop of the Asics is I do find if I use it a lot, I get a little bit more kind of calf niggles, but these aren't shoes you're meant to be using day in, day out, as I have been recently to kind of catch up on my testing of the shoe. So I don't think it's going to be a huge problem if you're using it just for races and the odd kind of training session. The other concern though with the Asics is durability. If you are a heel striker like myself, oddly don't seem to get it on the right shoe. I thought I ran the same kind of heel strike on both, but yeah, so I've ripped off the kind of covering on the exposed foam at the back of my left side here, and this is my left side of the Vaporfly, which has, you know, probably hundreds more kilometers on it compared to the Asics. You can see, even though I have taken a little bit off the Nike, it's holding up very well, whereas after 50k in the Asics, getting a lot of kind of wear and tear there. So if you are a heel striker, that durability might be a concern. I'm going to say it looks bad, and it on the Metaspeed Sky Original, it looks really bad, and I used it for kind of 150k, but the performance didn't drop at all. So although, you know, it does look a bit like scuffed up and like everything's going wrong, I don't think it actually affects the performance of the shoe that much. So I wouldn't necessarily worry a huge amount about it. So other than those kind of minor qualms about durability there, I think these are both really fantastic racing shoes. Great and versatile options for any distance. That's the other thing about them. I think there are some shoes out there like the Alphafly, which I do love for the marathon, but don't always find amazing for short distances just because it is so big and so much better in a straight line than it is turning corners. Whereas these two are both very versatile, lightweight, nimble shoes that are great for races of really any distance.
So for my run test then, I've done lots of miles in both of these shoes. Vaporflies, I've raced lots of marathons in them. I've run my fastest marathon in these shoes. So my PBs, these are the shoes that I've used. So I'm obviously going to be a fan of those to a certain extent. They've been my favourite race shoe for a long time. The Metaspeed Sky Plus, I've done really fast, sort of all-out race 5Ks. I've done sort of 10Ks where I've sort of mixed up the pace between easy miles and then faster miles, so, you know, mixing some intervals in. I've also done a full marathon test in both of these shoes. I did a marathon test actually where I swapped the shoes out every 6 miles as well, just to see how they compared on those kind of fresher legs and then on tired legs deep into the marathon as well. So my take on these shoes, I think the first up that I'm going to say is that these are both really good race shoes that I've really enjoyed running in. I think they've both got kind of serious merit. I think they, you know, you're splitting hairs and there's margins here about what you're going to get out of each of these in terms of race performance. And I think I could go out and run a PB in either of them. I do have a favourite, which we'll reveal later on. But really the difference for me comes down into when you get into kind of the sort of the stack of that foam and how the plate works and how they feel on the foot. With the Vaporfly NEXT 2, immediately when I put them on, I feel like I sort of they tilt me up. They sort of get me a bit forward onto my forefoot. They make me feel like I'm going to go out and race. They're nice and lightweight. They're nice and nimble. They're nice and agile. And they just feel racy to me. They're like a shoe that I put on in the morning and go, yeah, it's go time. It's time to go fast. And I've really enjoyed running in them for that. The Metaspeed Sky Plus, I do feel like you've got the kind of bigger stack that runs all the way along kind of the bottom of this shoe, and that plate, the placement of that plate, which is deliberately kind of designed to kind of spread the pressure to engage the foam across the foot, makes for a kind of flatter overall run. And you kind of, I sort of certainly think you kind of feel that lower drop. When you put them on, you do feel kind of flatter. I've also run a mile in these sort of side by side, you know, one shoe on each foot, and there's a very noticeable difference in terms of that kind of one's up and one's a little bit flatter. The other thing I will say with the Metaspeed Sky, I had to work a little bit harder, even on those kind of fast 5K runs where they ran really well and I ran faster than I thought. I think I did like a sub 18 minute. No, I didn't. I did a sub 19 minute. Don't get carried away. When I'm really tired legs, where I'd run a 10K before the day before, I wasn't really expected to run fast, wasn't very well trained, and these performed really well. They gave me more than I thought and helped me get through that race, and certainly kind of help. I had to find the sweet spot to engage the plate and the foam and make them work for me. And I think I have to work a little bit harder to actually get them to work at their best. The thing with the Vaporfly NEXT% 2, by comparison, I think they sort of naturally almost force you into that kind of form. You have to be running well, I think, in your sort of best form to get the most out of these as well. But the difference here is that these kind of make you get into that form. You can only really run in them, as far as I'm concerned, in one way, and that is kind of up on your toes and sort of quick feet and running well. The Metaspeed Sky Plus, I think you can be a little bit sloppier. There's benefits and there's kind of negatives to that. One is that it's a bit easier to be sloppier. The other thing is if you're, basically going to chance it in a race and you're not really sure what you're going to get. Let's say a marathon where you're not sure if your training's gone right, you're going to start a race. If it all goes wrong the last 6 miles of a marathon, you can fall back on these. There's a bit more protection in that kind of foam and rocking back a little bit further on your heels. The Vaporfly NEXT% I don't think really offer that when you sort of start to struggle a bit later on. The flip of that though is that when I did that kind of marathon test, when I was doing the last sort of 12 miles, 6 in these and 6 in the Vaporflies, the Vaporfly's lightness on the foot and it kind of forcing me to get up it was actually a real treat when I swapped out of the Asics Metaspeed Sky Plus into the Vaporfly. I actually felt more like running with that better form. So there's that. Overall, I find them both sort of really comfortable. I do like, there's extra kind of cushioning around the heel collar and there's a bit more of a traditional feel on the foot. I do sort of in many ways kind of like that on the Metaspeed Sky Plus. I think that makes them maybe a little bit more versatile as a general shoe that you might use for sort of more training. I wouldn't really necessarily train too much in the Vaporfly NEXT% 2. What I think is really interesting is that I haven't tested the Metaspeed Edge Plus, which I think may be the shoe that's kind of designed for the sort of high cadence run, and that's more my running style. And maybe that would be a fairer comparison against the Vaporfly NEXT% 2.
So on the run for me, I absolutely love both of these shoes. The Vaporfly 2, I've talked about many, many times as my favourite shoe. I've used it for most of my races, most of my PBs I've got in this shoe, and it's just fantastic. It's just so bouncy, so propulsive. That carbon plate is really noticeable. It feels like your foot is being propelled forward. It feels like you're being pushed onwards, but it just makes the run so efficient while you're doing it. Some of the races that I've done where I've raced in the Vaporfly 2, they've just felt easier, and I'm maintaining the same pace that I've ran at with other shoes, and it just feels like this shoe's helping you more. It's not making me as tired as other shoes would, and I think that's the beauty of the Vaporfly 2. It's just so efficient and just propels you forward and just keeps you bouncing ahead. The previous Asics Metaspeed Sky has been one of my favourite carbon plate shoes as well. I've always said it's the second best carbon plate shoe to the Vaporfly and the Vaporfly 2. So I was really excited to try the Asics Metaspeed Sky Plus. Now, I really enjoy this shoe. I've done a few runs in it so far at speed, but also I raced a 5K in it the other day, which is the first fast 5K I've attempted for a while since I've been injured. And I absolutely loved it. I got pretty fast time considering I haven't done any speed training for a long time. Just a few seconds off of my PB, which is about 18 minutes 55 at the moment. And I absolutely loved it. It just reminded me how much I loved the Asics Metaspeed Sky shoe previously. I don't think there's many differences. I definitely noticed many differences in this shoe in the previous version. I would say that even though there's a little bit more foam in there, that extra weight, I didn't notice that. And also I didn't feel it was particularly more bouncy. So what I would say is that if you are looking at getting the Asics Metaspeed Sky Plus, if you can get the Metaspeed Sky previous version cheaper, I'd probably do that because I think they are very similar to each other. But I still think it's a fantastic shoe. If they're the same price, probably get this because, yeah, it feels great. It's really propulsive, and it's still down as my second favourite carbon plate shoe at the moment. So my verdict on these two shoes, you probably guessed from that this is a battle between my two favourite carbon plate shoes basically, and the Vaporfly tips it for me. It's just a little bit bouncier. It just feels really efficient when you're running in it. The Metaspeed Sky Plus does, but not as much. It's got the very similar feel to the Vaporfly and the Vaporfly 2 for me, but it just doesn't get it as far as the Vaporfly 2 does, which is why this is still my favourite running shoe when it comes to racing in carbon plate shoes. Absolutely love this shoe. But I'd say this is a brilliant shoe as well. So I'd go for the Vaporfly 2, but this is a very, very close second.
So it's boring to always just say, you know, get the Vaporfly in the verdict of these verses, but probably going to say that here again. I think when it comes to performance, it's very close, but I think the Vaporfly works a little bit better for me with that higher drop, that kind of more aggressive style, especially on shorter distances. And the other big thing about it is a little bit cheaper, but also it's actually quite often in sales now because it's been around a bit longer. And the other big thing is you might well already have the Vaporfly, and I think the Metaspeed Sky is a really fantastic shoe, the Sky Plus, but I wouldn't be rushing out to buy it if you already have the Vaporfly at home as your kind of top dog racing shoe. I'd say the performance is quite close between them, depending on maybe your style of running, but I prefer the Vaporfly, and I don't think there's many people who are going to get a huge upgrade by going to the Metaspeed Sky Plus, even though it is a fantastic shoe. There is the question though, maybe if you are a much more bounding runner than me, you might really get a lot more from the plate, the way it's positioned in the foam compared to the kind of higher drop, classic scoopy plate of the Vaporfly. So maybe that's something to consider if you do have that loping style. Look at Eilish McColgan running, she's doing very well in the shoe. If you look like her when you run, fantastic, then it might well be worth checking out because it is, you know, built to suit that kind of runner. But I would also say if you're not that kind of runner, and I'm not that kind of runner, like I say, I'm a Healy shuffler, I still love the shoe and it works very well for me. So if you do want to check it out, you can put off slightly by this idea of stride runners versus cadence runners. I wouldn't be too put off. It's still a great shoe that will work for lots and lots of runners.
So my verdict then, if I had to choose one shoe, I mean, this is a shoe that's been popular. You go to many race starts, look around at the feet, and this shoe is still on the feet of loads and loads of runners. There's a reason why that is. I personally think that the Vaporfly NEXT Percent 2 is still the best race shoe over many distances. And I think kind of from 5K up to the marathon, this would be the shoe if I was chasing a PB that I would go for. But the way that I kind of split these shoes into sort of two categories is this. Essentially, if you're really well trained and you're pretty confident you're going to be able to hold that whole race pace in fine form, running at your best, and you know everything's going to be right on the day, this is the shoe that I would lace up. The Vaporfly NEXT Percent 2 would be the one that I would pick to go all out, knowing with confidence that I've done what I need to hit that time that I'm going to go and try and run. If I was rolling the dice a little bit more and I didn't know what I was going to get on the race day, and I thought there was a chance that I might end up on the struggle bus somewhere deep if I couldn't hold the pace and things were going wrong, I would definitely choose the Metaspeed Sky Plus over the Vaporfly, because I think there's less risk if things do go wrong and deeper into a race. So I think there's definitely a place for the Metaspeed Sky Plus. I also think if everything, you know, if you do that and then everything turns out that it's all going all right, you're going to get a great performance out of the Sky Plus as well. It is a good race shoe. You know, we're very much kind of splitting hairs between these two here. I think it's definitely got a place. But if it was me personally picking which, overall, had to pick one shoe that I would go out and buy, I'm afraid it would still be the Nike Vaporfly NEXT Percent 2.
That's a comparison of the Nike Vaporfly NEXT Percent 2 and the Asics Metaspeed Sky Plus. Do go and check out our full reviews of both shoes to get a bit more information on each. And yeah, please like, subscribe, ring the little bell. Loads of exciting carbon shoes coming out at the moment. I'm staring at one right now that's very exciting. So do make sure you ring the little bell so you get notified when we launch new videos. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next time.